Hi, I'm Gleb, and today lesson about 5G private networks. So let's start with terminology. What is it, private network? Private network is a specific network for limited geographical area, for specific group of users or devices, and with specific services, with specific requirements, usually specific requirements for security, for latency, for throughput, for some cases. And actually you can see multiple terminology related to private network. I mean, it can be vertical networks, it can be industrial networks, it can be enterprise networks, non-public networks. Basically, it's all the same, and I would use the term private network in this video. Some part of equipment can be localized or can be public. For example, the radio network can be public, so it means that radio network, it completely belongs to public mobile operator. Can be shared, it is in share mode. That some cells may relate it to a private network, yes, or can be completely based on enterprise premises. So what does it mean? It means that even physical equipment can be localized and built inside manufacturer, for example. Transport network, pretty the same, can be public, can be shared. Core network can be public, so provided by public mobile operator, can be shared. For example, in case of mobile virtual network, when public network is run as a virtual mobile operator. Core network can be based on cloud solutions such as Microsoft Azure, or let's say some cloud services such as Amazon Cloud. And a core network can be dedicated, so just a rack of equipment, yeah, localized somewhere inside manufacturer. Spectrum can be dedicated, can be licensed, can be unlicensed spectrum. We will talk about it later as well. Can be shared in case of RAN sharing mode, or can be public. It is when users from private networks they share absolutely the same resources with public cells. Data traffic can be localized if there are some requirements for that. So what does it mean? It means that there is no connection to public networks, or can be, or can have access to public networks via, for example, firewalls, VPN, and so on. Security. Usually for private networks there are some additional security requirements. There are some additional requirements for availability, for other cases, and it depends on the case, of course. It can be B2B, B2G cases. And what's more interesting is that there are also another type of network, is mission critical network. It is usually private network with specific requirements for availability, for reliability, for providing voice services, specific voice services such as push-to-talk or broadcast, multicast services. And such mission-critical networks, they must work in a very severe conditions with, I mean, they should be able to work in case of earthquakes, in case of tsunami, in case of fire, and some emergency situations. So it can be additional requirements for such type of private network. And right now, let's move on with other aspects of 5G private networks. If we look at history, we can remember that first computers, first networks, first line phones, they were developed for government purposes, for industries, for business. So the same situation can be with 5G networks and private networks. I believe that private networks they can be as a driver for B2B, for B2G cases, especially when it comes to 5G networks development in new areas. It means that mobile operators, they can provide very specific services for new industries, for new areas, and gain from that cooperation. It means that 5G become as a single platform for everything, for connected everything basically, for roads, for electricity, for smart city, smart manufacturing. And what does it mean? It means that there are some risks because telecom becomes critical infrastructure. It becomes very important in terms of political situation as well, especially with today's what's going on today with some vendors. Yes, some vendors from Chinese, for example, they restricted for Europe, for Northern America, and I believe that Open RAN concept can be very useful and can be very good alternatives to diversify such risks in order to not to rely on just one or two vendors. Yes, in this case, your critical infrastructure will rely on multiple companies. Of course, it has some negative sides, but I believe that Open RAN is a very good alternative and it's very possible. For Open RAN videos, if you want to know more, you can find these videos here. And right now, let's talk about alternatives to 5G private networks. Basically, private networks can be based on wired standards such as Profinet, ModBus, PowerLink, HART. Such standards they based on TCP/IP stack and can be based on wireless standards such as TETRA, PMR for voice services, for push-to-talk, for walkie-talkie services. LPWAN networks such as LoRa, such as narrowband IoT, Wi-Fi for broadband services, and 4G and 5G, of course. What's important to understand? It is that 5G network can replace all kind of that networks and become as a single platform for private network connectivity. This is very important to understand. Let's talk about negative sides. Wi-Fi. Usually for Wi-Fi standards, not so good situation with mobility services. Pretty high latency can be not enough to support mission critical networks cases, and not so good scheduling and prioritization of traffic, I mean quality of service. 4G has next negative sides. First of all, there is no true slicing as in 5G. 4G and non-standalone cases, actually they cannot support mission critical communications, and very low cloud and virtualization for such networks. So again, probably 4G networks not so flexible when it comes to deployment scenarios. 5G, for now at least, has pretty high cost, 5G may be very complex for some personnel when it comes to enterprise. So what does it mean? It means that vendor should take care about private networks, should provide managed services in order to operate 5G private network. And time to market. What does it mean? It means that there are some time to wait until the pure 5G network in standalone mode, when it will be able to provide the full services for multiple connections, for ultra reliable and low latency cases. And right now let's talk about other aspects of 5G private networks. Let's talk about types of private networks. Let's try to classify them. First type is hosting, is when private network is a part of public network and probably have just a firewall or VPN to public network. The second case is over the top, is when private network is completely rely on mobile network operator, for example. The next case is virtual operator, is when public network as a virtual mobile operator and maybe some functions related to cloud solutions can be based on cloud solutions provided by cloud provider such as Microsoft Azure or some Amazon services as well. And sharing. The radio access network can be shared, can work in sharing mode. This can be MOCN, MORAN, the core, or slicing. So slicing refers to 5G networks basically. So let's talk about the particular examples how private network can be developed with 5G technology. Okay, let's look at this example. Here we can see that some part of 5G network is divided and dedicated as a private network, and some part is dedicated as a public network. For example, local UPF, let's say so, is in a role of orchestrator, is in a role of traffic ruler here, and can be as a point for local breakout, for operation and maintenance system of enterprise, for mobile edge computing for enterprise purposes, local IMS, push-to-talk services, and so on. User plane, we can see, can be divided between private and public network. And UPF function from public network is in the role of anchor for all other private UPF functions. But control plane is dedicated for, is on mobile operator side, let's say so. So what does it mean? It means that authentication, mobility functions, for example, they on public side, and slice selection as well. When it comes to slicing, we can see that our networks, they use the common 5G dedicated hardware as a 5G base station, but resources is divided and isolated in a logical way as a slicing solution. Slice for private network and slice for public network. It means that users, they can use, for example, the same devices, but when that user requests the specific private services, it can be served by the private slice. When it comes to public services, opposite way. So this is one of the example. Actually, we can adjust that edge, yes, that edge in that way, we can, for example, completely the full network localized on hardware enterprise premises, yeah, built on enterprise hardware premises, or we can deploy our private network completely as a virtual network on public side or even in a cloud. This is also possible. So let's look at an example how a private network can be deployed in case of dedicated network. Okay, let's look at this example. Here we can see 5G network in a box. What does it mean? It means that the full dedicated 5G network with core part, with radio access part, we can localize and deploy as hardware enterprise premises on common equipment, I mean, not a specific equipment. Here we can see that some part can be allocated for baseband, for processing unit, for indoor or outdoor private network. Maybe additional baseband unit is required, yes, it depends on the case, or a router in case of indoor solutions such as Ericsson radio dot system or Huawei lamp sight system. It's possible. Then we can see server. This is basically a server based on common equipment such as Dell servers, HP servers, and some virtual machines runs here. And we can deploy the fully dedicated 5G core network functions here. Virtual AMF, virtual UPF functions, SMF, maybe some functions, additional functions related to security aspects, yeah, in order to enhance our security for private network. Then we can see another server. Basically, it can be the same server, I mean the same hardware, but this can be a multi-purpose server for the purpose of push-to-talk services, for the purpose of local IMS system, for the purpose of mobile edge computing, yes, and of course power supply, fan, some transport, synchronization, yes. What else is important to say? That this is a real solution. It's not a new story actually, and I believe that 5G with virtualization can help to can be as a driver here for B2B, B2G sectors, as I said before. Another case is when we can use fixed wireless access for private networks as well. Here we can see 5G customer premises equipment. This is industrial CPE. And this industrial 5G CPE can be as a gateway for some local private network, very small private network, yes, with a limited area, for Wi-Fi, for controller, for other proprietary networks, yes, but just providing the connectivity over the air. And such industrial CPE can be served either public radio access network or either a private network. It doesn't matter. It can be as an access point as a start point for a local part of private network, for example. So both of them is real solutions. It's already used in many cases. And again, the key concept here is virtualization, because this one and this one is completely based on just Dell servers, HPE servers, nothing special, just a common equipment. And with the rise of Open RAN solutions, Open RAN concepts, probably this part yeah, and this part will be based on Intel architecture as well, or some other common equipment. So basically it was my short lesson about 5G private networks. If you like this video, you can like it and subscribe to my channel. If you have any questions, please send me your questions in comment section below, and stay tuned with IoT Understanding channel. Goodbye.